Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us for this half-hour Labor Day edition of Across the Fence. I'm Keith Silva. Labor Day was first recognized as a federal holiday in 1894 as a day to celebrate the American worker. Traditionally, Labor Day is celebrated with parades, parties, and picnics. The esprit de corps of this holiday is to be both contemplative and active, reflect on how far we've come, but don't forget to have fun. With both those ideas in mind, we want to take time today to reflect on the impact UVM Extension has on Vermont communities through the actions of its faculty, staff, and volunteers. There is no one better qualified to talk about every facet of UVM Extension than Dr. Roy Beckford. As Associate Dean of the UVM College of Agriculture and Life Sciences and the Director of UVM Extension, Dr. Beckford's job is Extension. Roy, we've had many conversations off camera about the work of our Extension colleagues, and so I thought we would take today, Labor Day, to talk on camera and recognize some of the work of Extension. Before we get into specifics, as the leader of this organization, give viewers a 20,000-foot view of UVM Extension and how it works in Vermont.
All right, so Extension as a national program began in somewhere around 1914. It's interesting that Extension began in Vermont the year before that, which puts Vermont in a position of pioneer in Extension. Essentially what Extension is that arm of the public-facing universities land-grant system that actually takes information and education from the university to the people to make it active in their lives. That's essentially what Extension is. So it takes research, it applies it, it takes educators into the communities to empower our farmers and our food sectors, as well as several other sectors these days, to make sure that people are empowered. Yes.
As we reflect on the year so far, we know the flooding and the rain is foremost in many people's minds. Vermonters stepped forward to volunteer, and Extension was no exception. How will UVM Extension impact preparedness moving forward as we continue to deal with environmental disasters like this in the future?
Well, let's put this in context. Extension has always been integral in the lives of the people of the United States, and certainly at the center of agricultural development in the state of Vermont. And we want to make sure that Extension continues to play that central role that we've played for over 100 years. Right. The point is that we're very, very careful to ensure the sustenance of agriculture at all levels of Vermont life. And so we've been doing research. We've actually been doing applied research as well, which means we want to do those things that apply to people's livelihoods, to make sure that we mitigate against climate issues, against environmental issues, against ecological problems, to ensure that agriculture and agricultural development and all its value-added components remain an active, actual issue in every facet of development in the state of Vermont.
Foremost in people's minds.
Absolutely.
And you are not just, you're putting your money where your mouth is, you're co-chairing a task force, the Agricultural Recovery Task Force. Tell us a little bit about that.
So what we want to do with this task force, and I actually was appointed to this by the Secretary of Agriculture, Anson Tibetz. My co-chair is Nicole Dubuque of the Agency of Agriculture. Mm-hmm. And the whole idea is to reach out to stakeholders across the state of Vermont, understand what they went through, understand what they're going through, and kind of engender a recovery kind of database to make sure that we inform future issues like this. So remember, any kind of disaster that happens, you have to have a kind of a response and a kind of review of all of that. There are different stages in a disaster. And so recovery is one of those stages. And so we want to understand the recovery phase as well as we can so that we can provide information to our state agencies and federal agencies as well, and to the University of Vermont, that is a player in all of this, to make sure that we are taking the proper actions and decisions in future events such as this one.
This is about learning. This is sort of what we learned, and when the next disaster happens, which is likely to happen sooner than probably most folks would wish,
absolutely,
we're prepared.
So it's about learning, it's about mitigation, it's about empowerment. You want to make sure we put those things together so that this doesn't catch us off guard at any juncture in the future. We want to make sure that we're doing all those things and putting all the component pieces in place so that we can't prevent the disasters, very likely, but we can certainly mitigate, alleviate, and respond properly and appropriately when the disaster happens.
When I was preparing this program, I emailed you some questions, and you responded saying that if we're going to talk about labor, then we should start with migrant health and migrant education. Tell us about these groups and what their bearing on Vermont's labor is.
So Extension on a whole has a direct impact on labor in agriculture in the state. But I kind of wanted to pull those particular groups out because of the kind of niche work that they're doing in labor issues in the state of Vermont. Migrant farm workers play a very integral role in agriculture in Vermont. We don't have the pool of laborers in this state that we can depend on, that's coming out of high school or colleges. So we have to depend on people from outside of the state, outside of this country even, to help us harvest the food, prepare it, that we consume. I mean, look at the apple industry and all of that. It's integral that we have these folks. And so for many years, we did not have within any aspect of agriculture the kind of support groups who were helping our farm workers thrive. And remember, thrivability with our field laborers has a direct impact on our food and the delivery of it, and how clean and fresh these foods get to us. So the Migrant Health and Migrant Education Program actually support these groups, support their children with homework and all of that stuff to make sure that they thrive, and so that the industry as a whole will also thrive in Vermont.
Now, Roy, just to sort of balance it out, I know there's folks out there that would say many of these people are here illegally, they're breaking the law, we should not help them. How do you respond to that?
Very often, it's a misnomer. Migrant workers are not necessarily illegal, all right? And I don't know, I've heard this before from many of the folks in Extension, that you really shouldn't call people illegal. The fact is that some of them might be illegal. Our focus is not on the illegality, but on the peopleness of these human beings that are here to actually help with what we do. And so our focus is really on making sure that they thrive and that they help sustain the food systems within the state of Vermont. That is what our focus is.
And they're here and they should be treated like human beings.
That's exactly what our focus is.
Due to the geography and topography of Vermont, UVM lacks a localized agricultural research facility. And so the farms of Vermont are our laboratories. The farmers are both the participants, guinea pigs, beneficiaries, call it what you will, of that research. Talk about how the work of what the work of UVM Extension is when it comes to research.
When Extension was coined in 1914 as a national program, the whole idea was that it would be associated with what's called the Agriculture Experiment Station. The Agriculture Experiment Station is really a collection of research environments within the state, and then certainly across the country, where we would generate research on agricultural issues particularly. Nowadays, actually, that's actually broadened to include almost every facet of human life. But then that was the focus. The idea really then was that all the research that was generated would then pass on to Extension. The Extension agents would learn what the research is. that would take it to the farmers, applied on the farmers' fields, whether in livestock or crops or whatever commodity. And then when there are tweaks required, to take that back to the researchers, so that there's a dynamic movement of research and extension back and forth as we developed our industries over the years.
Is extension kind of a conduit? Is that kind of what we're talking about here?
It is an active conduit of research and information and applied technology and ideas across all aspects of agriculture and environment and social work.
And when we're talking about research, this isn't white coats in a laboratory. This is in the field, on the field, and it extends, pardon the pun, to everything, whether it's talking about educating foresters about how to work with their clients to maybe start maple sap operations, or all sorts of asset marketing. All of it sort of falls under this umbrella of research.
Absolutely. Sometimes it's about white coats, because if you're looking at entomology, for example, where you're looking at insect, pests, that kind of thing, it might be white coats. So when you're looking at soil testing, looking at nutrients, looking at heavy metals, it might be white coat. But most times it's not. Most times it's active work in coveralls and boots, right? Looking at cow poop, for example. All of that streaming out of the farm. So it runs the gamut again. It's a gamut thing again, but extension is involved in every aspect of the generation of the idea and then the extension of the idea.
The majority of the work, as we said, is research dedicated to both basic research, that sort of pursuit of knowledge, and then applied research, answering questions. And for me, when I tried to think about what's the best example of this, what first came to mind was the Proctor Maple Research Center.
Yeah.
Talk about the direct impact that Proctor has, the research that goes on there, on Vermont sugar makers, and how this then extends to Vermont's economy, how we all benefit from the work done at Proctor, for example.
Well, Proctor Research Center is really a unique entity in the state of Vermont. It's the only research entity of its kind in the entire United States, right? And so wherever you see maple syrup, wherever you see the technology around collection of sap, looking at the trees, the way the trees grow, the way the trees produce sap, the way the trees are actually tapped, all of that happens at Proctor, or because of Proctor. And the industry is significant and broad, and there are a number of other states these days that are beginning to encroach on us and to do more work in maple production. All of them taking research data from Proctor. So the impact is not just in the state of Vermont. The impact actually runs throughout the United States and certainly even into Canada and worldwide, wherever maple is produced. So the impact of Proctor is significant. It's actually punching way above its weight in terms of the scale at which it functions, and also because Vermont is relatively a small state, but a big powerhouse when it comes to maple research and production.
But also impacting the local economy, and whether it's people buying maple syrup and sap collection, tubing or equipment or anything like that, and also the simple sales of maple products comes back to Vermont, and it's all local. It's not like there's some corporate maple giant out there.
Absolutely. So one of the things I don't want anyone to miss in all of this is that the research is not only about the productivity or the production part of this. It's also about the productivity, the marketing, the business. All of that comes together to kind of fold its way into what makes research and extension at UVM so significant.
We often mention on Across the Fence that 4-H is the first class that many Vermonters take at UVM. Now, the university's focus is not specifically on grade school students. So why does that make the work of UVM Extension 4-H that much more vital when it comes to education?
Let's start. When Extension was established in 1913 in Vermont's case, one of the first things that we did was, of course, we besides the ag experiment station and the research, the applied research, was that we wanted to actually make sure that our young people were being empowered and educated to, as they age, to actually participate in all of this process. And so the Boys and Girls Clubs that existed basically were kind of transformed into 4-H. And 4-H means hands, heart, head, and health.
Very good.
Whole idea was to get our young people motivated by the ideas that were beginning to burgeon out of all these new things that were happening in agriculture. 100 years ago, agriculture was the leading science, right? And we've made it so significantly functional. When you eat a piece of food or consume anything on your plate, the last thing you're thinking about is farms and farmers and extension. But all of this is a framework that goes into making sure that you have foods and other commodities on your table every day. And 4-H played a very, very significant role in making sure that that happens.
One of the things I think that may get missed in the 4-H story is when you go to a fair, when you go anywhere where there is an animal demonstration, chances are 4-Hers are taking part of this, or young people who are 4-H adjacent, shall we say. There's volunteers there. There's people who are club leaders who are giving their time. I know this happens with youth sports, of course, but the people that you're seeing there aren't being paid. They are volunteering, and we rely on those volunteers. UVM Extension relies on those volunteers, and they should be thanked for their work.
Right, and I'm so happy that you said that, Keith, because you have been, as a member of the Across the Fence, an important member of the Across the Fence team. You see this on a daily basis. We couldn't do as much as we have done without our 4-H volunteers. We have many other volunteers in other parts of Extension as well that do similar kind of work, but our 4-H volunteers are important. We cherish them, and very often they do this kind of work without getting the fanfare. And without getting the thank yous that we really need to give them. So if anyone on this Labor Day is listening to this, I want to make sure that I say a big kudos to our volunteers, but certainly to our 4-H volunteers who continue to do the work that nobody sees on most days.
From kids, we move to animals. Vermont's landscape, as you know, is a working landscape, thanks in large part to agriculture. Talk about where Vermont livestock is today and where it may go in the future.
And the key there is working landscape, because 50 years ago, the working landscape, what you see if you as you drive around the state of the undulating hills of Vermont would be cows, grazing on the hillsides, particularly in the summer. It would be an interesting sight to see. We have over 250,000 cows in the state of Vermont. And when I say cows, I mean cattle. It means the males as well, because the males are important, even though we sometimes dismiss them. So, that's what the point would make.
Right.
But anyways, our working landscape, as the amount of land in productivity remains around the same, even if the number of farmers have declined. What we have noticed is that the number of working milking cows, for example, has not declined because the farms are getting larger, they're consolidating over the years. And so Vermont continues to play a major role in production of milk. Significantly, more than 2.5 billion pounds of milk per year, or something in that order. We also have other livestock that are actually coming in. Some of them were here before, like sheep and goats and so on. And even in recent years, there's some minor niche livestock that are coming in, like alpacas and deer and so on, for various purposes other than milk. There's also fiber and so on and so forth. So Extension is actually playing a role in ensuring that there is sustainability around all of these, and to make sure that our working landscapes are actually favorable to all of this, not just to the traditional dairies, but to the goats and sheep that are importantly of late.
I know one project that you and I worked on together was Goatdairies, and I know this is something that you're passionate about. We're not trying to, no crystal balls or anything, but are we getting to a point where cattle dairies, cow dairies may where goat dairies may come up to where cattle dairies are now? It's not a competition, but is that changing landscape that we may be seeing?
It's possible. As the dynamics within our state changes, as new groups of people move in, taste and preferences are going to change. And so there are lots of people around the world, ethnic groups around the world, not minority groups, but ethnic groups around the world, who actually prefer goat milk, which actually has significant amount of health benefits over cow's milk. And so you'll see that these things are going to change as our population dynamics change. And so I don't know, I can't predict when goat, for example, is going to reach to cattle, but certainly it's increasingly playing a role in the agriculture industry of the state of Vermont.
We started this conversation mentioning the impact of climate change that climate change is having on Vermont, flooding, rains, all those sorts of things. How is UVM Extension, we talked a little bit about it, but how is UVM Extension directly involved in mitigating climate change and providing information for future generations?
All right, at a general level, we, over the years at UVM Extension, have seen changes in the ecology, in the environment, and certainly in the climate, long term. And we've actually made attempts to specifically address some of these things through the creation of the sustainable, some of our programs as well. The Center for Sustainable Agriculture, for example, is one important group that has been established to address issues in our working landscapes, to make sure that we're taking care of our soils, our forages, our crops. In forestry, we're making sure that we've hired a new faculty in forestry last year to look at all those changes and impacts in forestry and climate. So we are actually in UVM Extension making sure over the years and continuing in the future to mitigate against climate change by looking at the issues way long before these issues become actively important in people's daily lives. We want to make sure that we're mitigating and we're protecting and we're learning and then passing on that information.
The forestry hire is very important because our forests are telling the story. They told it back with acid rain back in the 70s, and now again, they're the places where you can look and see what the impact is and look out on what that impact may be.
Absolutely. And Vermont is important. I mean, once again, it comes back to the forestry and the Proctor maple issue. 1 in every 4 trees, based on some stats I saw a couple of years ago, 1 in 4 trees in every 4 trees in the state of Vermont is a maple, to see how important that is. As the climate changes and as we see all these emergency disasters happening, we're going to have to find very, very important ways to mitigate against any issues that might impact the maple industry and certainly our forest economy, which is also significant in the state of Vermont.
Roy, we've got just about a minute left. I can't give Lake Champlain short shrift of only a minute, but how is UVM Extension working in and around Lake Champlain?
There's an important program within Lake Champlain that's called Sea Grant. And if you live on the coast, you'll hear of Sea Grant, but in our case, this is our sea, for want of a better term. And Sea Grant really is an extension program, or it's composed of programs in extension in watershed alliance and watershed forestry that impacts Lake Champlain. And so extension is also involved there at a very, very high level. We have faculty and we have staff who we pay at various levels who are involved in making sure that Lake Champlain is sustained long into the future for our children and grandchildren to enjoy.
Roy, thank you very much. As I've hoped we made clear in our discussion, extension is tightly woven into the fabric of Vermont. Vermonters rely on the benefit from the work UVM Extension, whether we know it or not, and I hope we've shined a light and showed some of the work. We could never show all the work, of course. We'd need a TV show for that. I want to thank everyone here at WCX for making today's program possible, and as always, thank you, our viewers, for stopping by Across the Fence. Happy Labor Day.